What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Lure Lab episode here on the Serious Angler Network. As always, I am your host, Andrew Full, and we hope you enjoyed our last episode, which we were talking about blade baits with Kurt Hofig that came out last Saturday. But this week, we have another special guest, which is something that we are going to be doing for the foreseeable future. And today, we are going to be talking about wintertime trap fishing with 2023 Elite Series qualifier Cole Sands. So let's not keep him waiting here. We'll get him in and we're going to break down everything that he loves about winter trap fishing, from his setup all the way down to the technique. So what's up, Cole? How are you, man?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Not too bad. You know, we're discussing offline here. I still coming back from the flu here, so I apologize if I get short-winded. It's just one of those things right now. But how's fishing been?
Man, it's been good. You know, this is a fun time of year. We've had kind of some unseasonably cold weather, so it's kind of pushed the fish into a winter pattern a lot quicker than it usually does in the South. But I'm definitely not complaining about it. You know, I love throwing an Alabama rig of jerk bait, and especially throwing a lipless crankbait, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Is that lipless bite kind of started up for you down there?
Yeah, it was actually really good when the water was in the 50s, and then it kept getting cold and it got back into the 40s, which you can still catch them on it. You got to fish a little slower, fish a little different. But now we're kind of on a little warming trend, so I think it's going to really get good in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. So let's dive right in, right? Like, what is your trap throwing setup?
Well, I keep it super simple. There's one rod I throw, and it depends a little bit on what trap I'm throwing for line size. But as far as the rod goes, I use a 7.2 medium heavy Witch Doctor Tackle Sermon Series rod. And what's so special about this rod when ripping a trap, and you know, this is something I do for 4 or 5 months out of the year down here on Chickamauga, is this rod right here is 50% glass, 50% graphite. So me fishing Chickamauga, Gunnersville, a lot of these lakes around here, I'm fishing a lot of heavy vegetation, you know, hydrilla, milfoil. And most glass rods you get, they're not strong enough to rip out the grass, but you know, they have the glass tips, so they're really good to play the fish. Whereas if you're using a graphite rod, it's strong enough to rip out the grass, but then you're going to lose some trap fish because, you know, it's just too stiff. So this rod was really, you know, kind of uniquely designed for baits like this because it's pretty strong, you know, up to, you know, 7/8 of the rod, but that last eighth or quarter even is very flexible, very forgiving when it comes to fish jumping. So it's a really awesome rod setup.
As far as what was the length on that again, Cole?
This is a 7.2.
7.2. Is that so? That's your preferred length is 7'2"?
Yeah, that's pretty much just my standard. They make a 6'10" as well, which I'll throw kind of some of the smaller, like the 3/8 ounce or even quarter ounce size, Missouri Rattling vibes on. But that 7.2 medium heavy is just that is what I'm comfortable with trap rod. It just, you know, fits perfect in my hand. The rod's super lightweight, and I can throw it all day without it wearing me out.
Perfect, because when you're yo-yoing or ripping that, it could get tiresome if it was an all glass rod. So that's nice.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's the thing about this graphite. You know, it doesn't wear you out. It's that light setup, and you know, that's something we do. We yo-yo it pretty much all winter long. And if you're ripping it out of grass on top of that, you know, it is a wrist workout, and it's definitely will wear you out if you aren't throwing the right setup.
Right. And now, what was that reel? Before I rudely interrupted you, what is the gear ratio reel you use?
Yeah, so as far as the gear ratio goes, I usually use like a 7:3 to 1, or this one's even at 8. I think it's 8:1. So a pretty fast gear ratio. And the reason is because a lot of times we're ripping it up out of the grass and it's falling, and they'll tick it on the way down and they'll swim straight at you really fast. So I like a fast gear ratio just because I can reel really quick and pull into them. And even as it starts to warm up in the spring, sometimes the fish get super shallow, and I like a fast gear ratio just so I can burn it in like 6 inches of water. So I'm always at least a 7 when it comes to my reel selection.
Perfect. And then are you a straight fluorocarbon guy or a braid to fluoro or a braid? Because I've seen guys throw it on everything down there.
Yeah, I'm a straight fluoro guy, and I usually have 2 setups. I have my 5/8 ounce Rattling vibe from Missouri. I have that on 16-pound T7 Missouri fluorocarbon. And that fluorocarbon, I mean, I fish a lot of grass and I've never had a problem ripping it out. And I think it might be because of my rod setup. I could see somebody having to use braid if they're using an all glass rod, maybe. So that's 16 on the 5/8, and then on the little 3/8, I usually go down to 14. I just feel like it falls a little bit more natural. But I always use fluorocarbon. Mono, I don't feel like I get the sensitivity on them really light ticks when it's super cold. So fluorocarbon is always my go-to choice.
Awesome. Now, we talked about your setup, and it looked like you had 2 Yo-Zuri traps on there. So is that your favorite trap, is like the Yo-Zuri rattling vibe?
Yeah, so I've had every trap. I've thrown them all. I've caught a lot of fish on traps, and Yo-Zuri is one of my sponsors, so of course I want to promote them. But when it comes to trap fishing, I promise you, there's not a better trap made than the Yo-Zuri rattling vibe. I've used them all. I've caught fish on all of them, but what's unique about the rattling vibe is the way it falls. It really shimmies on the way down, and that is, I think, one of the biggest keys when it comes to getting bit in cold water scenarios is that real natural shimmy. And I'm actually to the point now, I got 2 trap boxes I always keep in my boat this time of year, and the only brand I have is seriously Yo-Zuri. And even though I'm sponsored by them and all that, if I had something I thought worked better, I'd keep it in the boat. But
now, does Yo-Zuri make a one knocker too? Like, is there time to throw like a straight loud rattling one to a one knocker you found?
Yeah, so last year they came out with a one knocker series, which I'm super excited about. Me personally, I always seem to start with just the traditional, BB rattle system. But guiding, one thing I have done is I'll usually have one of my clients throwing the BB, then I'll have one throwing a one knocker, and I have not figured out the science until as to why they eat a BB some days better than the one knocker. Some days they just do. I wish it was a water temp deal or condition deal, but it just seems like one day they'll eat one better than the next. So it's good to have both. You definitely want to have both and experiment a little bit. If I'm by myself, I'm going to have one of each tied on. Honestly, I usually have like 4 or 5 traps tied on in the wintertime just because it is such a dominant bait down here on the Tennessee River. But yeah, they do make a one knocker, and it's a phenomenal bait as well.
Awesome. Now, if you had to take any 3 colors out of the Yo-Zuri rattling vibe, what 3 colors would you pick up and why?
Okay. That's hard to limit it to 3, but
okay, we can make it 5. Like, I think you said 5, so let's go into your 5 favorite colors. Does that make it easier for you, Cole?
Yeah, I'll do 5. I want to throw one wild card out first, and that's the golden black. If I'm fishing anywhere where it's tannic water, Florida, I've been to some places in Texas, Louisiana that's set up like that. That golden black Yo-Zuri rattling vibe has caught a lot of giant fish across the country, but especially in those places like Florida and Louisiana, where you have that black tannic water. But now that one's out of the window, the top, we'll take the top 5 on Lake Chickamauga. Lake Chickamauga is kind of a clear body of water. Like I said, a lot of grass. So the ones you have to start with, you got to have the red, your red rattle style bait, because that's just a dominant. I was talking to Andrew before the show, and he said, that's a big fish catching bait, even up there in New York. So that's the mackerel. That's my go-to red. They also make kind of more of a Rayburn color, which is good on sunny days. But if I had to choose one of the red ones, that mackerel is just something that I don't think they see a whole lot. It's a really natural crawl color, and that's my go-to red one. Then your super sunny, windy days, you got to have the old school blue and chrome. This is a color that I think some people have kind of even gotten away from. But we caught a lot of really good fish on that. Probably my favorite color, the one that I have the most confidence in, is a ghost pearl shad. And that's just because we have the super clean water on Lake Chickamauga. It's almost a translucent color. And I've caught so many giant fish on that one right there. And, as long as the water's not stained, that is my go-to color. And then the last 2, citrus shad, for when you get those kind of muddy spring days and you want to throw a shad pattern, citrus is good. The red's also a great color for mud. But citrus is a phenomenal color down here in the Tennessee River. You see a lot of people throwing it in the summer with deep crankbaits. And then last but definitely not least is the royal purple color.
Mm.
And I think what's cool about this one is kind of almost a blend between a shad pattern. And I think with the purple, it almost comes across as a crawl pattern as well. Because it seems like when the red bite's really good and everybody's throwing red, you can go behind it with that purple and really catch them. So that's I don't like to
That's
show a whole lot of
interesting.
people that color, but I know a lot
Well,
of people
thank you
throw
for that. We greatly appreciate you
it.
showing out the juice there. But
Yeah, that's
what I can vividly remember my first trap fish was on the old like 2009, 2010 Yozuri Rattling Vibe in the Ghost Minnow. And we used to
yeah,
catch a lot of fish, even in the summertime up here in New York, on like that bland olive, translucent, clear bodied trap on any lake that had alowives in it. They would just crush that thing in New York for us. It's an
yeah,
awesome color. I wish it was still the same as it used to be, but it still works, the new version for me personally.
yeah.
So let's dive into it, right? Like, so where do you target bass in the winter with a trap and kind of just walk through your technique? I know you said you like to yo-yo them, but like if you go to a random lake somewhere in the southeast that you've never been on, what is the first thing you're going to look for to feel that you have confidence and you're able to go and catch fish on a trap? And kind of how would you fish it?
Yeah. So that trap really excels for me when the fish are in that 1 foot to 8 foot range. They get much deeper than that. I have caught them going up to the 3/4 ounce size.
Mhm.
But typically when I'm trap fishing, I'm looking for somewhere in that depth range, that 1 to 8 foot. And the biggest things that I look for, it's wintertime. The fish should be really grouped up, whether they're relating to bait or whether they're relating to structure. So because of that, I'm going to be looking at either points. What I really like down here is the last little bit of deep water in a creek before we get super shallow. Especially to get some of them colder days, they're just going to move out from that 1 or 2 foot to that 3 to 7 foot range. That's usually where I have my biggest bags of trap fish is that first point once it gets to 3 or 4 foot. Any little drain, any little ditch somewhere the fish can pull out and just kind of stage right there, that's also good. And then definitely you're looking for vegetation if your lake has it. If you have hydrilla, you can get on those hydrilla flats. And a lot of times with that, it's not even structure oriented. Yeah, if there's a ditch or something, it makes it better, or a point. But sometimes you just got to pick up a rattle trap, and that's the beauty of it. You can cover a lot of water really quick.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so, yeah, so I mean, vegetation is definitely probably the number one thing I look for. And then inside that vegetation, you're looking for the structure,
Yeah. Do you have a preferred
whether it's a
vegetation that
point
you
or a
look
drain.
for?
Just hydrilla. I mean, that's our main thing down here. If you're at a lake with milfoil, then it's milfoil. I don't throw it a lot around pads or anything like that, but definitely hydrilla or milfoil would be the top two. And if you're on like Gunnersville, eelgrass, the fish relate to it. It just seems like it don't matter what type of grass it is, as long as it's some type of grass, fish seem to use it.
Yeah. And hopefully you can rip it out of the eelgrass. I know that stuff can be a little sticky at times, especially up here. But I mean, I think the last place I would throw a trap is probably in a lily pad field. So, because that stuff just
Yeah.
grabs everything. So that would be bad news. But I'm sure if you had like hydrilla around the outside of a lily pad field, it would work great.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I've been on Gunnersville before in that scenario where you might have some dead lily pad stems, and they will get in it, and you fish around it. But if there's that milfoil or hydrilla edge on the edge of those lily pads, it can be really, really good.
Awesome. Now, one last question before I let you go here. When it comes to rail traps, all these baits come with like stock hooks. Do you upgrade the split rings on them at all in the treble hooks? And what do you put on them if you do?
Um, so for starters, I do with the Yozuri, I do not. Other brands in the past I have. It just depends on the quality of hook, and you can usually tell as soon as you get them just by how tacky they are. When you feel it, does it stick to your finger? And I mean, you can tell if it's a quality hook or not just by looking at it a lot of times. But the hooks that are stock on these, they're high quality, they're Japanese quality. So I start with these on there. I don't do anything to it. I tie it on right out of the package. Now, if I'm out there and I'm fishing a tournament and the fish are eating a rattle trap pretty good, I might go to a triple grip, like a
Mhm.
mustad triple grip where it's curved in. I just feel like if I hook one, they're probably not coming off. Because you are going to lose some fish on a rattle trap. You know, that's a piece of lead basically with some hooks dangling off of it. But if the fish are not very aggressive and they're just kind of slapping at it, I don't like those curved in trebles. I like it to be, you know, just kind of standard sticking out, because a lot of times they'll just slap at it and you'll barely get them. And you know, that might be the only chance you get is just a little bit of their mouth. So it just kind of depends on how the fish are eating it. You know, if they're choking it, I'm going to go to that triple grip, just because I feel like if I hook them, I can just kind of burn them in, get them in the boat, and not worry about it. But if they're just slapping at it really bad, I'm going to go to just that standard, you know, treble hook.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, Cole, I appreciate you taking the short amount of time to come on and discuss your winter trap setup. Is there any other points you want to hit before you kind of run off here?
Yeah. One last thing, you know, one thing right now that's really big is the bait size. And that's why the 2 rattle traps I have tied on that I showed you, I have a 3/8 and the 5/8. And in the fall that we're in right now, for a lot of the country, this kind of late fall, early winter type deal, you know, they're chasing really little bait. So I almost always do better this time of year on that smaller rattle trap. And even in the spring when it warms up and everybody's really catching them on a trap, you can go behind people with that little tiny trap and catch some really big bags of fish. So that's just something good to have, you know, something else in your arsenal that you can use.
Awesome. That is a great point. And it's kind of funny, like a lot of times we always think to go bigger to catch bigger bass. So to be able to add in a smaller bait and still have confidence, that's huge, because you know most people who are probably throwing a trap going down a weed laden flat, right? They're throwing that 3/8 or 5/8 or a half ounce trap size right in the middle. And if you can come in with that smaller one and catch just as many fish or bigger ones, I feel like the smaller ones sometimes too, you have a less of a chance of losing them because they get it so much better, kind of, right? I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, this spring we I had a couple clients catch 8-pounders on a little bitty trap that were hooked like in the
Barely.
you know, the tip of their chin. And but you know, them little hooks are pretty sticky, and long as you don't get in a hurry and horse them with that little trap, you usually land them. And one more thing about that little trap that is really deadly: if you're fishing thick vegetation that's shallow and you can't get that 5/8 through it, you can go down that little 3/8 Yozuri and you can really feather it through super shallow vegetation where you couldn't get that bigger trap. So that's a big thing right now with our water being so low down here, is you can kind of almost finesse that small trap through some of that grass you couldn't get a bigger trap through.
Awesome. That's a juicy little tip. Hopefully not too many people show up to your lake and do that behind you now, but we greatly appreciate you taking the time here to join us. Cole, thank you again, and congrats on qualifying for the 2023 Elite Series. And from all of us on the Serious Angler Network, we do wish you the utmost success next year in your rookie season.
Well, thank you, man. I'm excited to get it started.
All right, man. Good luck, and we'll be watching, and I'm going to let you go now, and I'm going to wrap up. So you have a good night, all right?
You too. See you.
Thank you, my friend. Bye now. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode here on the Lure Lab, where we discussed wintertime trap fishing with Elite Series qualifier Cole Sands. As always, if you're tuned in via YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment down below. Tell us what your favorite trap is in your wintertime setup or any time of year setup. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. It helps this podcast get seen to more viewers. Therefore, we can bring you more awesome content. And as always, we look forward to seeing you guys on next Saturday's episode.